I wasn't comfortable telling people about the violence at home. I would only post pictures of all the happy moments. Basically, it's a filtered life.
I'm Mary.
When it got physical, I knew I couldn't stay because love shouldn't hurt. He tried to limit me seeing my friends. He didn't want me to go back to work. He didn't want me to go back to school.
Me too.
Me too.
Me too.
It's on us.
It's on us.
On us.
Time's up.
Time's up.
Time's up.
Time's up.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Hi.
My name is Mary Chand. I'm a new grad nurse and a survivor of domestic violence. I'm proud to be here with you and all my fellow survivors today. During college, I met my ex-husband, who seemed like everything I wanted at the time. We married, we had 2 beautiful daughters, and it turned out that my ex-husband wasn't the man of my dreams, but the man of my worst nightmare. He was manipulative, controlling, aggressive, and violent. It was physical, verbal, emotional, financial, psychological, and sexual abuse. I tried to leave multiple times with my children because my gut was telling me that this was toxic. With my final attempt, I hired an attorney, obtained an order of protection, had my best friend keep an emergency bag with all our important documents, and drove some belongings away. We were able to successfully escape with only a short window of time. It was dangerous, terrifying. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking, but I knew I couldn't show it to my girls. With just the clothes on our backs and some essential for my kids, I left our home at the time, and I never looked back. Help USA helped me gain the confidence and skills I needed to get back on my own feet. They were there holding my hand when I needed it the most, giving me the strength to keep pushing forward with their endless support. Help USA's play therapy program is amazing, and the work they've done for my children will impact them for the rest of their lives. I'm forever grateful for all the resources this program has given us. My lifelong dream of completing nursing school to become a nurse wouldn't have been possible without the support of Help USA. I wish to continue my education to become a pediatric nurse practitioner to help underserved communities in New York City. I believe this goal is achievable with the help and support, and of course the continued generosity from the Help USA Survivor Scholarship. I am proud to be sharing this with you and my story today. There were many times when others surrounded me with doubt, told me to give up, and said I wouldn't make it on my own. But giving up wasn't an option. I owed it to myself and my 2 daughters to keep pushing forward to provide a happy, a healthy, and a safe home for us. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pamela Isaac, and I am here today as a grateful survivor of domestic violence. I want to thank Help USA for enabling me to get counseling. I'm truly grateful to all of you for caring to be here and providing the scholarship today. Thank you, Tamron and Ruth, for advocating on our behalf. Talking about being abused is okay and important, But as a 63-year-old woman now, today, I want everyone to know I am a survivor. I'm thriving. Thank you. Thank you. I'm thriving as a teaching artist and jewelry designer. I have a good, healthy life, but it was a journey. I was brutally beaten by my father since age 5. My dad would say many vicious things. He would call me a good-for-nothing and never told me, "I love you." In spite of the abuse, my mother sustained. She was loving and nurturing. When I was 10, my father decided he wanted to murder us. My aunt was able to get us away through the backyard, and my mother finally separated from my father. She found a job as a receptionist and made a happy home for us. But our happy existence was short-lived when my mother was shot and killed at our house. The case was never solved. From 12 to 18, I lived in 2 foster homes where I was physically abused and where I first learned about drugs and alcohol. At 21, I had my son. When I met Junior at a flea market, I was like a little girl, excited to meet this handsome man. But after a few months, things were missing from my house, and I found out he was using drugs. I was smothered, choked, and punched. He said if I told anyone, he would kill my son and me. This crazy man set my apartment on fire. I couldn't believe it. When Junior went to prison for arson, my healing journey began. It's a journey that is ongoing. One big lesson I've learned is not to look for validation from another person. I find solace in my faith in God. I love creating art, and I have gratitude for 25 years of sobriety. Thank you. I'm very thankful for this wonderful organization, Help USA, which continues to empower survivors of domestic violence. I would encourage anyone that's in an abusive relationship to get out. You don't have to do it alone. Don't isolate. Abusers love to isolate their victims. Help USA is a wonderful organization that is here for you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn about financial literacy and attend housing workshops. After experiencing abuse throughout my life, I also now have the tools needed to identify the traits of an abuser. I would like to thank my counselor, Juanita Reed, for her insight and encouraging me to write my essay. And thank you for hearing my story today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tamron Hall. How are you? Good morning. What is it? I don't know what time it is. Ma'am in the beautiful red, what time is it? Afternoon. There you have it. See, I knew a classy lady like yourself would know. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tamron Hall, and I'm honored to help celebrate the important work of Help USA. And as many of you know, for me, this is very personal. Approximately 15.5 million children are exposed to domestic violence every year, and 3 women are killed by a current or former intimate partner each day. Among these is my sister, Renata. She's a victim of domestic violence for many years, and she was murdered in Texas in 2004 in a case that was never solved. But my family, along with authorities, were quite clear who the individual responsible was. In 2007, at the Bowery Hotel, I hosted an event for an organization that teaches teenagers and young kids about domestic violence and that love doesn't have to hurt. And they get into the public school systems around 12, 13 to try to cultivate healthy dating habits. And I was asked, I just started at NBC, and I was asked to fill in host this event. Someone canceled, and I said, okay. And whatever your faith is, I believe in divine intervention, whether it's the shoe gods telling you not to wear a bad pair or something greater. as was the case this night, and I ended up being led to this event to MC it. And much like you will hear today, that day, there were survivors who were telling their stories. And I'd never publicly mentioned what happened to my sister, Renata. My father was in the Army for nearly 30 years. My mom was raised on the farm, these kind of tough people who you get quiet. That's your way of, shoring up in painful situations. And I never talked about it. And as each of these young girls were telling their stories, I felt so guilty. I'm from the South, as you probably know, because I say it every 5 seconds on TV. But we have this saying, fair exchange, no robbery. And that means, if I'm telling you something about myself, you're going to tell me something about you, and it's a fair exchange. It's like you've been at lunch where you tell your girlfriend all your business and they say nothing. You're like, ooh, I need to know what's going on in your house too. It's an exchange. And so I felt like I was robbing them of their stories because they were telling me. One girl was 15 and she'd received stitches in her head because her much older boyfriend had beaten her almost to the brink of death. And I'm standing there, this newswoman, not saying anything. And the universe literally said, you cannot do this. You are stealing from them. You are not telling your truth. You are not telling the night that your sister was beaten by this person in your home. And while you ran him out of the house, you didn't want to call the police because you didn't want people to know what had happened at your home. And so that was the first day that I ever told my family's story, my sister's story, and really the shame that I felt in being silent and not knowing what to do and not having the opportunity to tell her that I was sorry. But in that pain and that guilt, I found a way. And it led me to other great relationships like the one today with Help USA, the ability to turn my guilt that I still suffer with greatly into something bigger than what I was feeling, something that could ultimately perhaps save one of those 15 million children or one of those women who right now are on their knees praying that someone can give them a path out of the pain. And that's what Help USA is doing, and that's what all of you are doing. We're giving a path out of pain. So it is so important to be proactive in addressing domestic violence today, not tomorrow. The words today, not tomorrow are part of my morning meditation, not just because it's a show that I left today, because tomorrow belongs to me. It is about us. Tomorrow belongs to all of us. So my hat is off to everyone in this room and to the dedicated supporters and staff at Help USA for being there today and every single day for survivors. And today we get to award important scholarships, but we also get to honor an incredible woman who's risen to the very pinnacle of success in Hollywood at a time when the industry is very much heavily male-dominated. We know that. And no offense, sirs and sirs. We know that there are good men and not just a few, but we also have to look at things through the realistic prism of life, and it is a dominated industry. And I'd like to welcome to the stage to share her authentic experience with us today, the Academy Award-nominated costume designer for her work on Black Panther and many other groundbreaking films. Please join me in welcoming the 2018 Help Hero Award winner, Ruth E. Carter. Ruth, come on out. So when I was looking in my closet, you're with Ruth Carter, you're like, oh, I got to bring my fashion game.
Oh, and you did.
No, I walk in, she said, you look like a Stay Puft Martin. What do I?
Oh, no. I said, you look like a beautiful cloud.
Oh, thank you. One of the most intimidating, getting dressed for an event with Ruth and getting dressed with Andre Leon Talley. Oh, yeah. You're just like, I'm going to burn the whole closet down. Yeah. Nothing suffices.
Yeah, you did well.
I was reading in your bio about your Singer sewing machine that you received, I think you were 10 years old.
Well, actually, when my mother's uncle passed away, she inherited a little bit of money from him, and she went and bought a sewing machine. And it went in my room. And it was actually in a console. So I used it as a desk to do my homework. And then one day I opened the console, and I was like, hey, there's a sewing machine in there. So I opened it up, and I just started toying around with it, playing around with it. And I never really, I would never call myself a seamstress. Don't ever call me that. Or anyone that really knew how to sew really, really well. It was just a creative tool.
Wow.
So I began to cut up my clothes and restructure them.
Your mother had to love that.
Yeah. And so, kind of anything that was creative in the house, I was, all for it. My brothers were artists, and they had all kinds of cool things in their room to draw with. So, they'd come home from school, and I'd be in there messing around. So, it was that kind of an environment for me as a kid, and it just kind of kept going.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about your brothers and the environment. I mean, so much of what we discuss in the more serious note with domestic violence is the environment children are brought up in and what they're being exposed to. You were in this environment that cultivated the greatness that clearly is part natural, but it was nurtured.
Thank you. We were modest means. My mom, I grew up with 8 brothers and sisters, single parent. So what I was doing was, making, lemonade out of the lemons, I guess. Kids play with what they want to create out of anything they can find. So, I think that my mom was just always very positive. Christian woman. I feel like she was my first storyteller because she worked for the city, and she wasn't a counselor with a master's degree, but she worked in the counseling office for people who needed help, a lot like Help USA. People came in, drop in, and they needed a little counseling services. My mom worked there. So she knew everyone she knew. Divorcees, as they called them back then when I was a kid in the early 60s. And so I'd ride along with my mom in her car, and she'd say, oh, there's Mr. Smith. And I'd go, oh, Mom, don't roll down the window. And she'd say, no, he looks good. He's got a clean shirt on. And I began to take pause and see things differently about people and understand people's journeys. And a lot of things within our family dynamic shifted. We had mental illness in our family, sudden mental illness. My sister, who was a junior in college, suddenly encountered mental illness, and it kind of wrecked our family dynamic. But my mom held us together with this because of her counseling experience, not a degree, just experience with people. And we rallied around my sister and her crisis. And through that, even, I was finding myself in group sessions like a high school student, and I was hearing these stories. I was hearing people's stories and things that they were going through, and what had happened to them and why they felt sad. And I felt this great empathy for people just from hearing their stories. And I think that's why I feel so connected as a storyteller and as an artist when I read a script and I see the journey that some of the characters are going on. I feel like I've heard, and I can relate, and I can see things that I remember.
Talking more about that journey, when you are preparing to take on a film, a character, I've read so much about your research process. I mean, you are not just looking at a picture and copying something. I believe the quote was, you want to see the sweat in the shirt. Particularly, you were referencing in Selma, the way Dr. King wore his shirts and the tightness of the collar, you wanted to make sure was captured on film.
Yes, that's very true. In the South, when it gets hot, your glands swell. When you're marching on a hot pavement in the South, from Selma to Montgomery, you sweat. And I noticed with Dr. King and his collars of his shirt, I kind of felt the pressure of who he was and of his speeches and of the heat of the South and in the way that the swelling around the neck, and it may all have just been in my head, but I felt like that was a particular nice part of him that I did not want to lose when we recreated his look on David Oyelowo.
Going back to your journey from, a little sister looking up to her brothers and discovering this sewing machine to Jumpstart Now, getting applause for being part of this creative team of a film that was revolutionary. In the middle, a lot had to happen. Some challenges and a lot of successes. How do you take me on this journey? You're the storyteller. Tell the story.
I think that my theater training is what kind of catapulted me into an industry that doesn't necessarily hold theater as a base for film. So I'm grateful for the theater training that started me out. And that theater training was in Massachusetts, and it extended to Santa Fe, to the opera. And I learned how to organize the building of characters through theater. I learned how to break a script down. And I thought about those craftspeople that I met in theater. And as I drove from the airport here, I started to think about them, because they are the people that are behind the scenes that really know really, really well how to do things, how beadwork and how to do a beautiful rolled hem. And they take their time in creating like the beautiful outfit you're wearing today. Those are the people who go home and you wouldn't recognize them on the streets, because they believe in what they do and they are very willing to teach. And those are the people who trained me. Once I got out to Los Angeles, things kind of shifted in that the Hollywood framework was a little bit more of fashion and shopping, and it felt very superficial, and I couldn't use those tools that I'd learned from theater as much, because it was in the moment, it was quick. There was no buildup like you have rehearsals in theater, and you go through dress parades, and you really get to examine what you're trying to accomplish with the composition of a play and a story. You look at it from beginning to end, and in film, it's chopped up. You see the end, you see the middle, you may not see the beginning. So I had to learn that medium. As well, one of the biggest parts of that was the ability to sort of take that theater experience and immerse it in a cultural paradigm shift. And that was Spike Lee, Robert Townsend and his Hollywood Shuffle, Keenan Ivory Wayans. And during that time, in the late 80s, early 90s, I was going back and forth between New York and Los Angeles and working with these filmmakers who had a new story to tell, who wanted to show Black images in film in ways that we had never seen or we weren't seeing, who wanted to send a message. So I was working with Spike and doing Do the Right Thing or School Days, and then I was going to Hollywood, and I was working with Keenan and doing I'm Gonna Get You Sucker and the 5 Heartbeats, and I'd come back to New York and I'd say, hey, Spike, I just did I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, and he would be like, talk to the hand. So I had this heavy lifting with Spike and this real this real ideology, and then I'd go back to LA, and they were like, we want to tell jokes.
Right.
Little did I know we were creating this immersive experience of Black cinema for young filmmakers that are our Ryan Cooglers today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And And I'm really proud of that experience because every time I worked with them, I was learning something new. I was meeting Mos Def, and I was listening to music that, I met Odetta in her home. I worked with Ozzie Davis and Ruby Dee on the set of Jungle Fever, and, and Wesley Snipes and Denzel Washington were, rivals in Mo Better Blues, and it was a glorious time to be in filmmaking, and I was right there in the middle.
Yeah. It's so interesting. You hear Ruth and her startup to her story that takes us on this journey with all of these great film directors. You started not with Spike Lee and Denzel. You started with the people in the back making the garments, the craftspeople. And that made me think of the empathy you said you learned from your mother, that you didn't start with the big name. You started with the names of people we will never know. In your career and making it to where you are today, being a Black woman raised by a single mom, and all of these things that make us the underdogs, how did you turn that into the top dog that you are now?
I didn't turn it.
Well, listen, no one else is doing what you're doing, so it didn't magically happen. You put in the blood, sweat, tears, and respect for the people that we will never meet.
Thank you. I feel like I had a mission. I kept saying to myself, when I got Amistad with Debbie Allen and Steven Spielberg, I kept, doing the happy dance in the middle of my living room.
You can do that here if you want to show us what it looks like.
and I thought, this one is it.
Yeah.
I just so happened when I got that film, I had just finished a course at UCLA on art history of the same period that film took place, in the 1830s. And so I was like, wow, there was no photography, really. The daguerreotypes were just starting. So I used my art history books from the course to guide my way. I guess to answer your question, I kept thinking that this was the one, and wanting to do something different, being very excited. I think being really excited about the next journey, and the next journey led to the next journey.
Let me go through some of those journeys. Malcolm X, what was that like? Multiple films working with Spike Lee.
Well,
other than the "I'm going to get you" sucker criticism that he gave.
Well, I'll tell you a story. Just before I did Malcolm X, I worked on a commercial with Spike. I don't know if some of you might remember those Levi's commercials where the guys were surfing in their Levi's. Well, anyway, we did those commercials, Spike and I, and we did one of them. And we were at Huntington Beach in California, and the guys were surfing out in the water in Levi's. And I'm on the beach, so I put out my little blanket, and I had my bathing suit top. I was young then. And I started to sun, and Spike came by, and the guy who kicks the sand on you. He's like, Ruth, what are you doing? We're supposed to be working. And I thought, okay, I'm sorry. The guys are way out there. I'm just, okay, let me get it together. I'm sorry. And then so after that, I felt like I wanted to apologize. So I did a whole letter writing campaign on Malcolm X to the Department of Corrections. And I asked them if I could come in and look at Malcolm X's files. And they finally granted me permission, and I went to Boston to the department the headquarters, and they sat me in a cubicle, and they gave me a stack of files, all his original letters and his birth records, his health records, everything that happened while he was imprisoned.
That's incredible.
And I only had an hour, so I decided not to read anything. I would just go over to their copy machine and just copy as much as I could in that hour and read it all later. And so then after that, I sent it to Spike. It's like, sorry, guy, I know I was laying down on the job, but here you go. And I have those letters still, and it was another thing that kind of catapulted my enthusiasm for the research of Malcolm X, because I felt like when you get into the head of the person, you're better able to make decisions about some of the things that they would do in those times when they weren't photographed publicly.
How different is it to have that experience where you are researching a Malcolm X, a Dr. King, people who existed or still are alive today, versus where we are now, Black Panther, a futuristic place that doesn't exist, the most modern, humanity or civilization ever, and you are now having to capture what they would wear and how they would look. Where do you start?
It's the same process.
Really?
It's the same process. It's imagination. Because even when we're doing a real life person, it's not a documentary. We're not approaching it from a documentary point of view. We have to entertain. So I have to do color palettes and composition, and I have to make relationship decisions on people, 2 or 3 people standing within one frame. So the process of researching it does mean that I take the colors of the times, and I make decisions on how those colors work within the script. So with Black Panther, we use the real tribes of Africa. As I've said in many of the interviews, the Ndebele of South Africa influenced the neck rings. The Turkana influenced the beadwork. The Tuareg of Mali influenced a lot of the metalwork. So it goes on and on and on from there. So all of that research and beauty, we really wanted to take the beauty, what a lot of African beauty was, which we couldn't really understand, really, I feel, until Black Panther really showed it to us, that scarification and beauty in the same sentence. Well, look at Killmonger and the, I call them the tights, just for clarification. The tights of the Dora Milaje have a lot of striations and strikes on them to mimic scarification and beauty. There's so much culture in all of the costumes. It was really important, and beauty was the determining factor as to what went into it.
Was there a moment when one of the cast members came out in the costume and you thought to yourself, "Ooh, I'm good. Look at this. Man." I mean, because I think we all fainted a couple of times in the film when, there's Angela Bassett. I get goosebumps thinking about the headdress. When Denai and Lupita come out and these warrior, I actually have an emotional reaction, or I'm going through menopause. I'm not sure. But just thinking about how I felt at the movies watching this swell of beautiful blackness that was transcendent of race. Beauty is beauty, and that's what we saw on that film. Did you have the same reaction to any of the costumes?
Well, I had that reaction with the excitement of the idea to create them.
Really?
So if you were to see me in the workroom, my excitement starts with the idea of it, and I kind of rally the troops, and I tell them about the idea, and I can see it, and we are all happy. Now I have to realize it. So sometimes it's in the form of an illustration. So the illustration is so great. Everyone is, I guess I'm saying the illustration is so great, but it is. And we're real happy about it. So we really want to realize these illustrations. Then when we get the actors ready, and we go through the process of fitting them and fitting them again and fitting them again, the excitement builds. So by the time we get to the set, we're kind of holding our breaths. We're kind of waiting for everyone else's reaction. I remember Angela Bassett coming to set for the camera test, and a lot of times things aren't completely finished at camera test time. We're really showing, Marvel what things will turn out to be, maybe, possibly. And the Dora Milaje was very close to done. And when she saw one of the Dora come out for the camera test, she started spanking me. And I was like, what are you doing? She was like, oh, you bad girl. So I felt like that was a vote of confidence.
Yes, I would say so. As I said in the beginning, you've been nominated twice for an Oscar, and I was glancing back at the Building Better Lives. When you look at the industry now, and as I said in the intro, male-dominated, but also white-dominated, what is your advice to the next person who sees a role model in you? And by the way, you're growing up, there was no Ruth Carter to look to. You know, I had local news anchors that I could say, this is possible for me. There was no Ruth Carter in Hollywood walking across stages receiving awards. So you're now that symbol of hope. What are the words that you have to offer in building a better all of us, honestly?
I'd say there's a big thing is you don't look at race for help. You look at people for help because people want to help you. And I have been given incredible advice and incredible opportunities from people. And that little fire inside of you, and let me just say I'm honored to be here with the scholarship recipients because they know how to ignite that fire inside of them and move through what's burning inside of you to go. Now that you have experienced that, your career is no different. Right. Listen to yourself. Listen to your passion. Be a student of your passion. You can follow my journey, but don't mimic my path. I'm blazing that path for you, but your journey is your own. So I want you to be a student of your own passion and use that, what you know already, how to do to propel yourself to take the next step and the next step. That's all I did. So I took one step, and as I said, I got excited about something. I was like doing the happy dance in my living room when I got the 5 heartbeats. I'm doing the happy dance again when I got Amistad. And now I'm doing the happy dance for Black Panther. So get the happy dance going.
Well, we will all dance along with you on this journey. What a worthy recipient of the honor today. Thank you for inspiring us, and we can't wait to see the next project that brings the happy dance. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Frances Pierre, the Chief Operating Officer at Help USA. Before we begin, I'd like to invite a special friend of Help USA and all women, longtime advocate on sexual and domestic abuse, Linda Fairstein, to join in presenting scholarships. These scholarships are made possible through the generous support of Nancy Seaman, the Cooper Union, TD Bank, and many of the ticket holders in the audience today. And that concludes our program. Please join us right outside the theater for our luncheon reception. Thank you so very much.